Hi there, it's Gabrielle Nicolay from SpeechKids. I'm a speech language pathologist, also called a speech therapist, with almost 20 years experience serving young kids and their families. And I teach little kids to talk, and I help their parents understand them better. And so these videos are a way that I do that. And today we're going to talk about biting. And this is a subject I love to talk about, and a subject that horrifies many parents of small children, because it's kind of a horrifying, aggressive act. And so we're going to take it apart a little bit. I'm going to tell you 3 things that you need to know about biting, and I'm going to give you 3 tips to handle biting. And hopefully we can start to break this open a little bit. So the first thing you need to know about biting is, although it feels like an incredibly aggressive act, it is communication. Your child is trying to tell you something. And if you had a big duh moment there, then you're with me, and that's great. So in the moment of the bite, your child is trying to say something like, no, I really don't want to do that thing that you're making me do. Or, you scared me and you got in my space and you're too close. Or, stop doing that really annoying thing that you're doing. So there's communication back there. And so it's obviously behind the bite. And so if we can look past the bite and see what the communication is, we can start to have a little bit more sympathy for our little person who has clearly gotten so frustrated. And this brings me to the second point, which is biting is an act of last resort. Most of the time, and always the first time it happens. So if you go back to the first time your child bit, it was probably the last best thing that they could think of to do in the moment to make the thing stop that they wanted to stop. And so it starts off as a tool of last resort. And so if they have a better tool, they would use a better tool. If they could use their words, they would. They wouldn't be biting people. Until we teach them that if they bite somebody, they get what they want. So we're going to talk about that in a second. But it is a communication tool of last resort. And so we need to, we're going to teach them that biting is socially unacceptable. But keep in mind, they're pretty new here, right? Toddlers, 1-year-olds, 2-year-olds, they're new on this planet. They don't know all the rules. They don't know that biting is super socially unacceptable, that we're going to have this big triggered response to it. So when they try something in their tool belt that isn't a good tool, we need to teach them a better way. One of the ways we do that is to try to get kids to use their words, yes, but there are times when that's not available to them. So we need to give them some other strategies. The third thing I want to mention with respect to biting is that sometimes there's an underlying sensory reason why a child is biting. And the reason is our jaws are pretty big joints. And a place where we process a lot of feeling and process a lot of body perception is in our joints. So our ankles, our knees, our hips, our elbows, our shoulders, and our jaws. And so if you think about a child, for example, who likes to jump, because that's giving him lots of, we call it input or feeling into his joints, that makes you feel relaxed. Think about a massage. Massage is super relaxing. And this is kind of like a massage that's delivered directly to the joints. And so if you see a child who's biting, and usually that's biting on shirts, biting on toys, biting on non-chewables, and we talked about mouthing toys in an earlier video. But if you see a lot of chewing or biting, there could be an underlying sensory reason. So what can you do about that? You can get any number of chewables that are on the market on Amazon.com that they have silicone chewy kinds of things that you can put in your mouth. But the other person you can talk to is an occupational therapist, because sometimes the biting is a sensory underlying issue that needs to be addressed by somebody who's trained for that, and that is an OT, a pediatric OT. So 3 things you needed to know about biting that you maybe didn't think of before. All right, I also wanted to give you 3 tips to deal with the biting, because biting is, again, it's like this super triggering thing, right? We like get all mad about what it means that our child was biting. And as we've just discussed, it didn't mean anything other than your child needed that thing to stop and they didn't know how else to do it. So the best way to deal with biting is to prevent it from happening. And I'm just going to let that sit for a second. It's a little bit like, and we talked about this again in a previous video as well, about throwing. Little kids are not subtle about what they're about to do. Now, every once in a while you do have a little kid who is very fast and it's hard to tell what they're going to do before they've done it. Okay, so we'll get to that in a second. But most children are pretty obvious about what's about to happen. They're coming at you with their mouths open, right? And they're going to chomp down on something. So if you can prevent this from happening by moving the thing that's going to get bitten, sometimes your arm, sometimes your shoulder, or by moving your child away from the thing that they are about to bite, you can stop the bite from happening. If it never happened, it never happened, and you don't have to talk about it. And I'm waiting for that resistance to come up because I hear you saying, but they meant to hurt me, or they meant to hurt somebody else. And yes, it's true, but at the same time, we have a lot of intentions in our own heads that don't get acted out. And when they don't get acted out, we don't get punished for them, right? So like, how many times has somebody cut you off in traffic and you think, oh, I could just murder them? Of course you're not going to kill them. Of course you're not. Because thoughts are different from actions, right? So even if your child intends to bite someone and they don't, it's okay. And you can deal with, wow, you look pretty frustrated or pretty mad. Let's get you something to bang on, stomp on, bite on that's appropriate, not a person or body part. So if you can jump in there, stop the bite from happening, and it's called redirect. That means like point their attention in a different direction. You don't have to talk about biting. It's okay. I'd love to know if you have questions about that one. The next tip I wanted to give you is if you get bitten, you the adult. And so if you get bitten, you have two choices. One is you can not react. And as I say it, I'm like laughing because it's a near impossible feat, right? To not respond when you've been bitten. But here's the thing. If you have a big reaction, and if you say, ouch, or that hurts, mommy, or any of those things, you are giving attention to something that you don't want to happen again. And that's called reinforcement. And when we reinforce a behavior we don't want to see, it gets a little tricky. So here's the other thing about that. Your child probably can't hear you or understand what you're saying in that moment anyway, because if your child is biting, it's because they're so frustrated that they are outside of the learning zone, what I call the learning zone, and they're not processing incoming information. It's a little bit like talking during a tantrum. So if you can not react, put yourself in a timeout, and then redirect and move on, and then prevent the bite the next time, you can try that. Here's what I did with my kids. I got in their face, and I'm going to do it in the video. I got in their face and I said in a really, really mean voice, just like this, "There's no biting." And then we went back to doing whatever it was we were doing. It has to be quick. It has to be unpleasant, not dangerous, but unpleasant. But then it also has to be over. Because what's going to happen is your child is going to cry, and they're going to cry big broken-hearted tears. And at that moment, it's finished. You can comfort them. You can go back to being mom. The bite is finished. It's over. So, love to know what you think about that one too. And I wanted to give you a third strategy, which is if your child has bitten another child, And this one is so tricky because it brings up all those feelings about how you're not raising an empathetic child because otherwise they wouldn't have bitten somebody. And, all of these feelings that other people are going to judge me, the parent, for what my child has done. And so just take a minute, try to throw that out the window for just a sec. Because in the moment of biting, the most important thing is going to be to tend to the victim, to tend to the child that was bitten, rather than paying attention to the child who has done the biting. And your child can help you with this. The child who has bitten can help. They can get an ice pack for their friend or the other child. They can help get the Band-Aid. So letting your child make amends for a wrong that they've committed toward another child goes a long way toward starting to build some empathy. So rather than simply punishing, right, your child for a mistake that they've made, for an act that was committed in the heat of utter frustration, utter panic, utter last resort, right? All those reasons that biting might happen, or in a fit of sensory overload, right? We don't need to punish. We do need to teach that it's not okay to bite people, and we do need to teach that they can make amends. So there you have it, 3 and 3. I'd love to know what you think in the comments, or shoot me an email or a DM or any of those things. And if you want more strategies like this, I'd love for you to check out my Toddler Talk online program for parents. It's over at my website at SpeechKids.com. And there's a tab over there that you can click on. Until next time, take care. Bye-bye.